Good morning. Can everybody hear me? In the back? And feel free to move forward. You've got lots of room up here, if you feel like it. You can see the picture maybe a little bit better. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Today, we all have the privilege of gathering to celebrate and honor the life of Lori Micken, who I know meant so much to all of us. Please enjoy the pictures that will be playing throughout the ceremony, and know that we are recording the ceremony, and we're going to make a link available probably in about a week's time for the ceremony and for the pictures also. So if you want to look at the pictures at your leisure, those will be available in about a week on the Friends and Davis website. My name is Rob Micken, and technically I'm Lori's first cousin once removed, though like all of her family members here, it was always just cuz. At this time, I'd like to invite another cousin, Maria, up to say a few words and read a psalm that Lori requested.
Good morning. My name is Maria Lace, and my mother was cousins with Lori. She is the only surviving one, and I'm here representing my mother, and she also is my first cousin. This is a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I don't really know what to say. Lori has been in my life, my whole life. As a little girl, she always sent gifts from afar. I grew up in Illinois. My mother was born and raised here in Montana, but she too moved to Illinois as a young woman. And she was in and out of our lives, visiting in Illinois. And it wasn't until I was a brand new teacher in Baltimore City that I met Lori. And we connected immediately. I'm now in my 35th year of teaching, and she and I just had that connection, a love of teaching. She, over the years, sent me so many things from Montana. I was a science and social studies teacher for many years, and she would send me porcupine quills and rattlesnake tails and all kinds of things that I wouldn't have access to outside of Baltimore City. And so I've saved all those things, and I continue to use them in my classroom, and my children have benefited through her skills and expertise. Thank you for listening.
So Lori, am I still there? Yes. Lori was a remarkable person who lived her life on her own terms. She knew what she liked. She loved Subarus that were red. She loved her chocolate dark. She loved Coca-Cola, full strength and sugar, and she liked her milk whole. She had a lot of interests. She enjoyed watching football, researching genealogy, studying history, and building and repairing anything she could turn her hammer to. In her 92 years, she was many different things to many different people, but I firmly believe that there are at least 4 things that she would want to be remembered as. The first is that she was someone who sincerely loved her friends and family. She preferred to live a fairly solitary life, but would never, ever miss an opportunity to visit with those that she cared for. Whether it was in person, on the phone, by email, or a letter, few things gave her more joy than hearing from people. You could hear the genuine excitement in her voice when you called to see if she was up for a visit. In the past few years, I'd always make a point of asking if there was anything I could do for her around the house when I would visit. And aside from maybe letting me bring in some firewood or fill up the bird feeders, she would always insist that she just wanted to sit and chat. She She didn't want to give up any opportunity to connect, even though I knew there were things around the house that needed to be done. And I'm sure that many of you have had similar experiences. And towards the end of the ceremony, we'll be opening up the floor so that if anyone has any memories or stories that they would like to share, we would love to hear them. Second, she was a lover of all animals and nature in general. There was a poem that she was fond of, and she asked that it be read at this service. So I'd like to invite my sister Kelly up to read the poem.
Hi. Before I read the poem, I thought I would just real quickly talk about, Rob mentioned that she was always cuz. Until he said cuz, that didn't even dawn on me. To me, it was always Cousin Lori. This is Cousin Lori. We're going to visit Cousin Lori. I can still picture or listen to her voice when she would call and she'd say, Kelly, Cousin Lori. And then she would go on with, are you watching football? Whatever it was. And she was always Cousin Lori. We referred to her that way with such endearment. She was just that important part of the family. Rob also kind of alluded to how important it was for her to keep contact with people. And one of my probably fondest memories will always be of her letters that we got, because she was a prolific writer. She wrote books, she wrote articles, she wrote poems, but her letters were just absolutely amazing. And we would get them sometimes on scheduled times. It would be a birthday, it would be St. Patrick's Day for me. But sometimes it was just a letter. She would see an article that she loved, and it just made her think of whoever it was that was the recipient. So many letters, and they asked questions, and they were full of lots and lots of, news about what was happening. And within those letters, she also created a sort of game, I will say, with my family. Because if you've ever read anything from Lori, handwritten, I'm sorry, did I say it? If you've ever read any of her handwritten things, she had a very interesting handwriting. It was very difficult to read. And we would do something as a family where the recipient would read the letter first, and they would say, well, I think she says something about snow, and there might be a dog. And then the next person would read it, and they would pick out more words, and by the end, our family would have this wonderful letter that Lori had written. So I have just wonderful memories of that. This is the poem that she asked to have read. It is an unknown author, so I can't give credit to anybody, but this is the poem. Fair hills and valleys of my native home, tonight I dream again of thee alone. Of sunlight peaks that touch the bluest skies, tonight I'm dreaming while the firelight dies. Then from the curling smoke that seems my world, there rise to thrill me memories of old. Broad fields of grain appear and forests tall, cool rippling sands beneath a waterfall. My native land of mountain lakes aglow, of rushing winds to thee in heart I go. Though this strange voice within that calls my name finds silent answers in the sinking flame.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lori was a lifelong naturalist. She loved everything in nature, especially if it was in her beloved home state of Montana. She was on cloud nine whenever hiking the mountains of Glacier National Park, spending time at the cabin that she built on Pierce Lake, hunting antelope out on the mussel shell, riding horses outside Cudbank, or simply watching the birds and wildlife from the comfort of her own home on Bozeman Pass. She had more dogs and livestock over the course of her 92 years than I could possibly recount here. There were llamas, horses, sheep, highland cattle, geese, rabbits, chickens. She had dachshunds, shepherds, Irish wolfhounds, Great Pyrenees, terriers, and corgis. She adopted her dogs Shag and Tikla late in life and made sure that they were taken care of in her will. Shag now lives in Nebraska with Lori's friends, the Carolins, And Tekla now lives in Arizona with Lori's friends Rick and Carol, and both are doing very well. I get reports on them every once in a while. And this is actually Shag in the picture of them. Third, Lori would want to be remembered as a teacher. Sorry, I'm not well up here. An educator. Are there any of her ex-students here for this? She taught for 35 years here. She never had any biological children, but until the day she passed, she always referred to her students as her kids. It didn't matter if you're now 50 or 80, you were always one of her kids to her. She took enormous pride in the years that she spent teaching you. And going through her personal effects these past few months, I have found boxes full of letters and cards from ex-students. She kept them all, and she kept track of where you went in life. She was a lifelong learner herself and never missed an opportunity to share her vast knowledge with others. I'm sure everyone in this room has benefited from that generosity in one way or another. She was an enthusiastic supporter of our public education system and was so happy that many of her friends and families chose careers in education themselves. And lastly, Lori was an author. She was always a writer throughout her career. But after she retired in the 1980s, writing became one of her primary passions. She wrote articles for magazines, penned short stories, and attended numerous writing workshops and cowboy poetry gatherings throughout the region. But her greatest works of writing were her fiction and nonfiction books. They were a great source of pride for her. She would spend countless months researching for one of her fiction books, which all had historical components to them. It will come as no surprise that accuracy was important to her. Lori was a complex person that didn't share a lot about her personal life and experiences. It was through her two autobiographical books that many of us really gained some insight into what a truly remarkable life she led. And when she wasn't writing one of her books, as Kelly was just saying, she was writing letters to the many people that she stayed in contact with from around the country and around the world. She loved to stay in contact with people, often sharing articles that she thought they might be interested in, or a map that might have some relevance to that person. She had a huge heart, and she loved to share. I'd like to invite my brother Sean up to read a psalm that Lori requested, and just have him talk a little bit about his experiences with Lori.
Thank you, Rob. Let me just set it here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Well, we're recording this up.
Of course.
A little bit extra.
Sure, thanks. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming here to get together and remember cousin Lori. I'm another of those cousins. My dad, Daryl, and his two brothers, Don and BJ, twin brother Don and BJ, were Lori's cousins and grew up really as siblings in the Cup Bank, Browning, and Flathead Lake area. And my dad, Daryl, who passed just a couple months before Lori, would call her his sister cuz. And they really grew up as siblings and family and ended up here in Bozeman together. Of course, we know that they're here in spirit too, the other cousins, my uncles, dad. As I was reflecting and driving over, or actually I was flying from Oregon, where I live now, I was just looking back through one of her memoirs, 90 Years in Montana, her second memoir, the first being 80 Years in Montana, which are just lovely reads. So full of detail and memories and surprising stories and really just colors in those parts of her life that you wonder about, getting to know your aunt, cousin, kind of in her 60s and beyond. There's just so much life that she lived, and with just an incredible sense of wonder, of nature, and appreciation, and adventure. And as I was reading this book again, something just popped out of me as one of her just core character traits is fearlessness. what an incredibly fearless person she was. And you just never know what's going on behind a person's demeanor. But I think that she really, truly was just absolutely fiercely independent and fearless in the way that she lived her life. These stories here really paint that picture from her setting up a base camp as a young grad student deep in the mountains to study little salamanders all by herself, just accompanied with her one of her little Dachshunds as her companion and protector, I guess. As she was up there in Blue Lake, somewhere near Ennis, I guess, she came upon a couple of lost hitchhikers who couldn't believe that she was out there alone, and asked her, "Aren't you afraid of getting eaten by animals or attacked by bears?" And she said, "Never once crossed my mind." And I really believe that. She just charged into her own life and way of living, and lived with a fearlessness that I think we could all appreciate and learn from. And there was one chapter and one little story here that really struck me as I was reading this. And then finally she leaves us with a few words that, as I reflect on them, really just capture that sense of fearlessness in how she lived and how she appreciated life, and how she would want us to celebrate life and be unafraid of what's next. And with that, just a quick story, a page or two from this quick story in her book, which she calls Warlock, the Last Horse. While in high school, I had 3 horses at different times: Snooks, an old Pinto mare; Irish, a huge sorrel gelding with white mane and tail, and 4 tall white socks; and Shamrock, a black filly with flaxen mane and tail. Then I was horseless for 13 years. When driving east of Bozeman, just beyond Bridger Canyon, I noticed a big brown Pinto in a field. On the return trips, I drove down to the house by the pasture and asked about the horse. His owner said that he was 6 years old, green-broke, a gelding. I looked up green-broke on the way over here. By the way, it means just a little bit treat. I agreed to buy him for $150. Martin said that he could not deliver him, as his one attempt at trailering him failed. The gelding kicked the old wood horse trailer to pieces when he shut the tailgate. So I decided I'd ride him home the 12 miles. Martin offered to loan me his saddle and warned me that the horse was deathly afraid of water, as he had nearly drowned in an irrigation ditch as a small colt. And that didn't concern me. There was no water to cross. Also, he warned, the gelding had never been away from that home pasture or his mother, and nor had he been on pavement. What could go wrong? What's the problem? I had driven the back streets through Bozeman to find the best route through town. Home lay on a quiet road 4 miles south of town. We navigated the highway pavement without a problem, passed the stockyards, and kept to the side streets with only an occasional woof and shy. He seemed to be enjoying the adventure as much as I. At the railroad tracks, he balked. Apparently to his horse eyes and memory, it was water. Death in water, fierce in water. I guided him back and forth across the road, turned around to reapproach, and finally got him to cross. His gigantic leap would have cleared a 6-foot street. My housemate Marga followed us part-time, slowing traffic on the highway and through town with her red convertible. Finally, the horse and I reached home, both exhausted, road-weary, and unnerved. I had also decided on a name for him, Warlock, and became totally infatuated with him. And she goes on to tell how they were buddies for 20-some years or something like that. He fathered a couple of colts, and they lived the rest of their lives together up there on the pass. I just got a real kick out of that. I thought it just was a perfect encapsulation of her spirit and fearlessness. And so she wanted to leave us with these words as well, from the book of Isaiah 55:12. For you shall go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Thanks again for being
So I can't think of a better tribute to Lori's remarkable life than taking some time for us to share some stories. So at this time, we'd like to open the floor, and if any of you have any stories, funny, touching memories, anything like that, we would love to hear. We are recording it, so it doesn't pick up unless we speak into a microphone, so if you're comfortable. This is really touchy, so you don't have to hold it up to your face or anything, but you'd like to say something?
Yeah. Do you want me up there?
Oh, no, we can bring it around.
My name is Lindy Gibson, and I'm 71, and I graduated in 71. I was born in 53, and Lori started teaching in 53, English, as I understand, for 1 year, and then she switched over to science and biology. I've been thinking of, ever since she passed away, different memories in case there was an opportunity to share. And I first had Lori as a teacher when we were at Lincoln School, and that was our middle school. And I put her picture on Facebook, and then under the comments I put, I was always afraid of her.
You're not the only one.
I was always afraid of her. She was who she was. Back when I was a teenager, mini skirts were in, and I had a skirt that was the fabric. It didn't take much fabric. I think my skirt was that big, and I'm 5'11", and one day she came to class, and I had on my lavender skirt, and she had a rule that she said, "Fink, get out of your chair." So I got out of my chair, I slid to my knees, and if my fabric on my skirt did not touch the ground, I had to go home and change. Now do you know why I was afraid of her? As I was getting out of the chair, I tugged and pulled and tugged and pulled, and by the grace of God, my fabric touched the floor. But I remember, some of you that are locals might remember the Duma family. They were Dutch, and they bought the 9th Street Island Resort Motel. You crossed the bridge at 9th Street, and it was a motel with rental units. And the Dumas were a large Dutch family. And Mark was in our class only for a few years. I think he was such a rascal that his folks either sent him to a church school or a military school, because he was a rascal. And one day we were playing this game up at the chalkboard, and it wasn't password. I can't quite remember that part of the thing, but anyway, Mark raised his hand and he went up and he wrote ape on the board. And Miss Micken was busy, and she went across the hall to Mr. Scudder's shop class, and so she walked out of the room, and Mark put a big R in front of ape, and I go, "We're dead! We're dead!" So, and he heard her coming back across the hall, and he took his hand and took the R out of ape. Another memory I have of her, well, I have an identical twin, and so Julie had her for school too. I didn't have this memory, but Julie, we talked about it since Lori died, and one day Julie was in her class, and Miss Micken had her Scout parked on B Street, right across the street from the school administration office, and she had her Scout there, and I don't know if they were teaching parasites or animal doodah, whatever it was. And Miss Micken took the whole class out to her Scout, lifted up the back hood, and there was one of her dogs in there. And he was resting, and she made him stand up, and she turned around, she lifted up his tail, stuck her finger in there, and pulled out a tapeworm to show everybody where it came from, like the book wasn't enough. Yeah, Julie said, "I'll never forget that." She pulled a tapeworm out of her own dog. So, then if you got good enough grades in science, she had a class that was called Science Club, and it was during the day. If you all had the same study hall, then you had Science Club, and you got to do practical things. Like one time we went out clear to the end of Fleshman Creek Road, and there was a a lagoon there, and we had to bring a container from home, and we all got to scoop up the water. Then we brought it home and looked at it through the microscope and saw all the diatoms and all the little doodahs and shapes and everything, and you learned that. Another thing, on the corner of B and Park was the Pepsi bottling company when I was a girl. And we got to have a tour of that, because in science club, you were privileged to learn hands-on field trip things. So we went to the Pepsi bottling plant, and I remember I knew that when I graduated from high school, I was going to work at the Pepsi bottling plant, because you got all the free pop you wanted. And back then, the pop came in glass bottles, and they were stored in square wooden crates. And I remember the one Perriott girl, she worked there, but I just knew, and it was interesting because they put the dirty bottles on, flip them upside down, and then they'd go through a machine and get sanitized, and then they'd flip right side up, and then the thing would do the carbonation in there, and then the syrup, and then they'd cap them, and it was fascinating to watch how pop was made. But then along comes aluminum, pop in a can, and the Lurkine building on the corner of B and Park was not built big enough to handle all the aluminum cans. So that's when the Lurkine company moved to Bozeman, and it's right along the highway. I think you guys know, between Main and 7th. If you look north, you'll see the Pepsi bottling company. Anyway, so we got that field trip, and then one time we got to go through Wilcoxon's, go down the basement and watch them make candy in these big stainless steel vats, and stirring the caramel and making all the candy and wrapping it and labeling it and dipping the chocolates, and that was quite an adventure. And then as we were leaving, there was a table with wax paper on it, and we each got to take a piece of candy. So those were my two most exciting outings, besides going to the end of Fleshman Creek, because I was a city girl and never been that far west. See what else? Yeah, I think, and then fast forward, I got married, moved away, had a family, moved back, and had a cleaning business. And so Lori had me clean for her when she and Linda had their house up on the Bozeman Hill, Sunflower Lane, 69 Sunflower Lane. And anyway, so I cleaned for her for a while, and it was kind of interesting. I'd say, blah, 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 Miss Micken. It's Lori. It's Lori. I had the worst time calling her Lori. It just, because she was always above me, and it's like calling Princess Diane Di. It was hard to do, but anyway, I remember one time she left a note. She was most often there, but one time she left a note, and one of the dogs had burped on the floor, and she says, today when you clean, and you know her house is all wooden floors with throw rugs and stuff, she says, would you please rinse the kitchen floor 3 times with clear water? And I thought, oh my gosh. But anyway, so I did it, and Linda was living there. She was playing the accordion at the time, but I loved her location and her independence and how strong she was. And if she could get out, once they plowed the road, she was out. She was just, like another Calamity Jane, as far as her, her countenance and just everything about her. She was just a rough and tough cowgirl. I think that's about it, that I cleaned for her, and all the dogs and everything. When I first met her, she lived on South 7th, at the end of 7th Street, and then she moved to Sourdough Road in Bozeman, and then in time, because I was gone for 17 years, then she and Linda built that house. But she was one of a kind. She was just her own person. And one time we were visiting, and I says, Miss Micken, did you ever want to get married? And she says, it's funny you would mention that, because when I was in school, and I don't remember if it was high school or college, she says there was a boy that was interested in me, and he was really sweet, and I really liked him, and he asked me if I would marry him. And she says, but I had so much on my mind, so much I wanted to accomplish. Looking back, I probably should have married him. So that put a little twinkle or twist in my heart, the regret. But anyway, so as we all know, she lived a very solitary life, and she was one of a kind. I mean, when God made her, he broke the mold. There's no one like her. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
I will.
Pardon me? Oh, sure.
My name's Kathy Gardner, and I was one of Lori's students. Well, I had her for 2 years, actually. I moved here from Illinois. I didn't get credits for her class because I already had all the credits that I needed. But she would go to the college, she'd ask me what I want to study, and she'd go to MSU and get whatever I wanted, and just before it on the side, she just always went above and beyond for her students, and we had a lot in common, I think, of the fearlessness and the way of life kind of thing. And after I moved back here, I ran into her at the dentist's office, and so we started getting together for lunch every once in a while, 2 or 3 times a year. And I got the privilege of taking her to her birthday for the last 3 or 4 years before she passed. We were going to go this year. That didn't happen, so, but anyway, she's my all-time favorite teacher.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Just
You don't have to hold it very close.
my name's Andy. I just wanted to follow up on something that she had said. I was Lori's neighbor on Sunflower Lane up above her. We had actually bought the property from Mike and Barbara here. And we hadn't built there yet. Everything was, I don't know, 6, 8 years ago. And I was up on the land one day, and there wasn't even really a road. The road, Sunflower kind of ended, and it was just like a little trail I went there. I looked down, and I see this little dot coming up the trail towards me. I'm like, it's a person. It gets closer and closer. You know, it ended up being Lori, and she gets closer, and she's got a 6-shooter strapped to her side. And she's coming up the hill there, and I met her and talked to her for a few minutes. She's very nice. And I said, gee, you know, what do you got this gun with you there? She says, yeah, that's for the rattlesnakes and the mountain lions if I end up going up any higher than that. Completely fearless about the whole situation. So, but it was funny, so after we talked, she went on her way, and I called my wife, and I said, you're not going to believe it, but our neighbor is Calamity Jane. That's literally the name that I referred to her as, was Calamity Jane. So we ended up getting to know her, and she was really a true Montana character. And if I have any regrets, that, you know, we would talk about the land and the property. Her knowledge and memory of it was just amazing. Old man Peabody did this on March 3rd, 1923. Just these dates that she would just remember were just absolutely amazing. So I kind of regret that I didn't pick her brain more and write more of that down when I was talking to her. But the other story that I have when you talk about her dogs and everything, I ended up having to train myself that if I was leaving, especially in the summer months, not so much in the winter, and I was going down the hill, when I would pass her house, a lot of times if she was out in the garage, one of those dogs would come running down the hill after my car, so I had to stop, get out of the car, walk the dog back up to Lori's house. And she was always very grateful for that. But I had to train myself a lot of times to give myself 5 extra minutes because I knew I was going to have to walk one of those dogs back up to the house. So Lori really was a true Montana character. And I think we're all really blessed that we got to know her on whatever level that we know her at. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, here it goes. Just hold it right up there. It's about right.
Lori was my 7th grade physical education teacher at Lincoln School. And I was relatively tall as a 7th grader, actually all along. And she was unique in that I don't recall another female boys gymnasium teacher, we call them, Bill's days. But I do recall very much her helping me learn how to play basketball better. And I went on and got a scholarship to University of Montana, Missoula for basketball. And so I owe her some thanks for her help along the way.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh.
I'm Cynthia Micken, and I'm a more distant cousin, but she always counted us as cousin too. So I'd come up quite a bit from Utah. And she could never figure out why I stayed in Utah, but but anyway, one time I came up, I bought my car from her. My first car was from her. And so I came up to work off some of the debt and watched the house and watched the dogs and the llamas and the sheep and the chickens, and it was a lot for me, but I brought my sister too. But one day the llamas got out. We were trying to get them from one area to the next, and they got loose, and so I was like, okay. And my parents had come up as well that weekend to visit, and we had like 4 of us on different corners of the lot to try to corral the llamas because they just didn't want to go back into the night area. So it was just quite an adventure. I always learned a lot from Lori. Every time I came, we had a great conversation, and we loved each other's company, even though we have such different lifestyles, I think. But I learned so much from her. And the first time we all came up, I don't know what time we were supposed to be there, about 4 maybe. And we thought, around 4. But we showed up, everybody came out of the car, and she's like, "You're running on Micken time." So she really was expecting us. It was funny. I'm glad I got to know her.
So I'm Lee Micken, Lori's cousin by marriage. She wrote a journal keeping detailed notes about the building of her cabin up at Pierce Lake. And only close friends and family were invited there. And she was kind of a contradiction that way because she loved that part of her life, her close friends and family, but she also loved her solitude. They were such diametrically opposed things. But at any rate, she tells this story in one of her journals about having invited a family up there who had 2 or 3 children. And how many square feet was her cabin, would you say? It was
300.
teeny. And at any rate, she invited them to stay over. So they brought their sleeping bags, and everybody found a few square feet to sleep in her cabin. And during the day, they would do outings, and the kids would set a fire and have a marshmallow or a weenie roast outside and stuff. And it was kind of pleasant chaos for a couple days for her. But she, as much as she loved people, she had a bit of an aversion to children. Nevertheless, these were close friends of hers, and she invited them, and the kids came with her. So she's writing this in the journal and about their outings and what a good time they had. And she said, and the kids kept busy doing blah, 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 and there was always something going on, and they seemed to have a really good time. She said, and then she had a couple of a Greek phrase there. And I thought, and she was so interesting that way because she was so knowledgeable in so many ways. She had a lot of Greek phrases that she peppered her writings with. But anyway, the Greek phrase, she was talking about the kids and the sleepovers and all that stuff and the busyness. And then she said, but blah, blah, blah. And so I Googled what that meant. And the translation of it is never again.
Thank you. Just a couple more things. I remember there was a season when Linda and Lori had an Adopt a Llama thing online. Does anyone remember that? You could send in so much money and buy feed for her llamas that she had. And I thought that was really unique for Miss Micken to be that up to date on doing something that was kind of interesting. I don't know if the family knew. You probably did. She had her Adopt a Llama program. Also, one time when I went to clean for her, if you knew where she lived, up and over the tracks and around and stuff. One day I commented, I says, the top of the mountain that you're on, I would love to go to the top of that mountain. She says, well, when the weather's good and the road's dry, let's do it. And I says, really? So one day when the weather cooperated, we got in her, I think she still had another Scout at that time. We got on the road. Were you ever to the top of that mountain? Okay, yeah, and it was all undeveloped. Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, she went over stuff like it was ice cream. I mean, she was just, it was on the edge. I almost, so many times I want to say, do you mind if I get out and walk? Because the road was just as wide as the tires. And she did that for me. We went all the way to the top of that mountain. So I was very thankful for that because I thought, that's a 1 in a million opportunity. Yes, so I just wanted to add those two things, how thoughtful she was that we went ahead and did that.
Anybody else? Perfect. Well, thank you for being here, everybody. It means a lot to the family, and I know it means a lot to the work. So we appreciate you being here. We do have some refreshments out in the, there's an office kind of off to the right. There's some cookies and coffee. We'd love for you to stick around and visit and say hello to the family. Love to find out how you knew Lori. Again, we will have a recording of this service and of the link to the pictures if you'd like to look at the pictures kind of a little bit slower and at your leisure. Those will be available in about a week. I have to do some traveling, so I'll try to get them out as soon as possible. But thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.